I've always seen myself as a committed husband and father, someone willing to do whatever it takes to keep my family secure and content. Like many, I envisioned a life with my spouse built on shared dreams and mutual support. Yet life often challenges our assumptions, and at times, even our best intentions face unforeseen obstacles. When I first met Sarah, I thought we made a great pair. She was ambitious and driven, traits I respected as we planned our future. I put in the effort to build a business while balancing family responsibilities. But gradually, the things that initially brought us together began to pull us apart, leading to fractures that ultimately shattered our relationship. This is the story of how those cracks deepened and led to the breakdown of my family life. My name is Paul Andrews, and this is how my marriage unraveled due to my wife Sarah's neglect of personal hygiene and her growing emotional distance. Sarah Ridgway Andrews and I were introduced by friends who believed we'd be a good fit. She'd recently graduated and was working in management at First United National Bank, while I had just started with Allied Accounting. A colleague set us up on a double date, assuming our professional backgrounds and values would make us compatible. There's nothing quite like the thrill of a first blind date between an accountant and a business intern. It was clear we shared at least one thing. Neither of us planned on sleeping together that night. I'd have enjoyed it if this average-looking blonde leaned in close, but she kept her distance, appearing uneasy with physical contact. If she had curves, they were concealed under her heavy sweater, long skirt, and jacket. We had an engaging conversation about our career goals, discovering surprisingly similar aspirations. We both came from middle-income backgrounds in smaller towns and were now in the big city. My goal was to become an entrepreneur, using my accounting skills to distinguish between a good deal and a great one. Her ambition was to advance in the corporate world, allowing time off for 2 or 3 maternity leaves to start a family. This gave me some hope that one day she'd want a family and perhaps be open to a relationship. At the end of the night, I walked her to her apartment. She gave me a quick hug, thanked me for the evening, and left. I thought, well, it beats drinking alone in my apartment. On Monday, Steve dropped by my office and gave me a high five. I quipped, "You must have had a relaxing Saturday night with Brenda." He grinned. "Yeah, Saturday was great. But I'm congratulating you. Sarah couldn't stop talking about you to Brenda. You must have made quite an impression." "Really?" I replied, surprised. "It was a nice evening, but I didn't think it was all that remarkable." Steve laughed. "Well, she told Brenda to tell me to tell you to call her, like a note-passing routine from junior high." "Well, I guess I should call her then," I said, still a bit baffled. Sarah apparently knew we could make a good couple long before I did. A few months of dating later, I finally saw beneath her reserved exterior. This woman was stunning, with curves hidden under her modest attire. I was awestruck when she walked out of bed one morning. She explained, "I blossomed in high school, but unwanted attention made me start dressing conservatively." Our relationship grew through a mix of strong chemistry and shared admiration, trust, and care. Marriage felt inevitable, as did our 2 daughters, Hannah and Miranda. Our physical connection was intense before we had children, and even better afterward. Sarah climbed the corporate ladder, taking on new responsibilities. I thrived at Allied Accounting, eventually earning a leave of absence to get my CPA. Mr. Karstadt, the firm's owner, became a mentor, teaching me more than any class or textbook could. One day, he invited me to lunch and confided, "I'm in talks to sell the firm to a large group. Paul, you're my best employee, but you won't do well under new management. I think you should leave Allied and start your own practice. They'd stifle your entrepreneurial drive and you'd end up miserable. Bring some clients with you so you're not starting from scratch." I was stunned but grateful. "Thank you," I replied, deeply moved by his encouragement. That weekend, Sarah and I talked it over nonstop. "Don't risk it by staying as an employee," she advised. "Forget about business risks and focus on climbing the corporate ladder. There's plenty of income to be made working in a big firm." "Yes," I answered, "if that's what I wanted for the next 35 years. Sarah, I'm afraid I'll end up resenting the routine work. This is my chance to pursue what I've dreamed of. I'll start from home and build a client base, then move to an office." Sarah frowned. "Paul, this isn't a smart move. We have 2 small kids and can't afford more risks." Her practical side took charge. "I can't wait until I'm old to take a risk," I countered. "It's now or maybe never." She sighed. "Fine, but I won't support this financially. I'll set up a new account for my income, covering half the household expenses. You'll need to handle the rest." "Understood, Sarah," I replied, though I thought, "and thanks for the support." But she wasn't done. "I won't co-sign any loans for your business. If it fails, I want no part of it. Since her tone was so detached, I had no plans to involve her bank. But I knew she'd take an interest once I succeeded. Over the following year, life wasn't easy. Sarah had a steady income while my earnings varied. By the second year, I was making slightly more than Sarah, but she wished I could bring in a more predictable monthly income. My business model was shifting. Rather than simply tracking finances, I was advising clients on potential deals, which is what I really wanted to do, and I was good at it. With higher earnings than Sarah, I began reinvesting more into my startup. I set my income to match hers and put anything extra back into my business. When promising opportunities arose, I'd reduce or even waive my consulting fees in exchange for a share of the profits, taking a 5% to 15% stake for my advice and lowering ongoing accounting fees. This reduced startup costs for clients and gave them access to my insights. Although it restricted me from auditing due to my investor status, this setup benefited both sides, with clients able to buy me out at any time based on market value. However, Sarah was displeased with these investments, so I stopped mentioning them. My accounting firm's revenue wasn't ideal, but my equity in these companies was building wealth not reflected on my balance sheet, as shares were valued at cost. With a skilled team in place, I dedicated more time to my kids, never missing a performance, game, or parent-teacher conference. Those were rewarding years. My children were content, and Sarah and I were doing well financially. Sarah's career progressed, and she was promoted to assistant vice president at the bank, reporting to multiple superiors. With her new title, she wanted a bigger home. "We need a larger, nicer place to match my position at the bank," she announced one evening. I suggested, maybe we should wait. She didn't bring it up again until Saturday, when she went to an open house alone and signed a contract. I was frustrated, but there wasn't much I could do. Through my Chamber of Commerce connections, I later learned she referred to me as the little accountant, and her sarcastic remarks about other accounting firms started to slip into our conversations. One Saturday, I decided it was time to address our relationship. "Can we sit down and talk for a few minutes?" I asked as I approached her in the living room. She gave me a dismissive look. "It can wait," she replied. "I have laundry to do." "I think we need to talk," I said firmly. "Let's discuss it tonight," she said, walking away. "Can you spare 15 minutes?" I asked after her. She called back, "Sure, later." That evening, she claimed to be too tired. Sunday morning, with the kids preparing for Sunday school, she left with them before we could talk. Later, as she was heading out again, I stopped her at the door. "Do you have a few minutes to talk?" I asked. She snapped, "Why are you nagging me all weekend? You're like a child needing his mother's attention. Can't you see I'm going to help my mom with her checkbook? I'll be back in an hour." "It's been a day since I asked for 15 minutes of your time," I replied. "I can wait another hour." 4 hours later, she finally returned, quickly starting dinner. After eating, I turned to her. "Now might be a good time to talk," I said, keeping my tone calm. She gave me an exasperated look as I continued. "I feel like we're growing apart, and I'm worried about our marriage." She dropped her fork as the girls looked up. "We don't communicate like we used to, and I feel like you don't respect me as your husband. I think we need to address this before it becomes a bigger issue." Her jaw tightened as she replied, "This is neither the time nor place for this conversation. I'm shocked you'd bring it up in front of the girls." "You should be ashamed, Sarah," I said, my frustration spilling over. "By brushing me off, you're shutting me out again. Is there something you're not telling me?" She stormed off, clearing her plate. I was left at the table with our daughters, who looked shaken. Miranda asked, "Are you and Mom getting divorced?" With tears in my eyes, I said, "No, sweetheart, no one's getting divorced. Moms and dads argue sometimes, just like you and your sister. But that doesn't mean we don't love each other or love you and Hannah. Mom just went out for a drive." They seemed reassured, but I couldn't shake the unease. After cleaning up, I worked in my office until late, hoping she'd return soon. Just before midnight, she slipped into bed beside me. I lifted the blanket, and she nestled close. "I'm not saying I was wrong," she whispered, "but I'll try to show you the respect I want from you." I held her tightly. "That's all I want, too. I want to be the best husband for you." This small reconciliation eased the tension, at least temporarily. A few years later, she was promoted to Vice President of Regulatory Compliance, which meant overseeing the bank's adherence to FDIC, Federal Reserve, and Comptroller of the currency rules. Her view of compliance fit the role perfectly. Nothing could proceed without explicit approval from the authorities. This is exactly the opposite of my approach, I thought. As long as it's not explicitly prohibited, I see it as allowed. It's clear this difference caused friction at home, and fortunately, she didn't know about my investments. They were legal, but someone like her wouldn't approve. Around this time, Sarah began attending bachelorette parties on Tuesday nights. The more she went, the later she'd return. Our kids, now 16 and 14, didn't need a sitter, but they still required parental guidance and attention. I was always there for them. One Tuesday evening, I heard frustrated swearing coming from the master bathroom. Curious, I went upstairs to check on her. She was at the sink, muttering, "Damn, damn, damn." "What's wrong?" I asked. "My damn wedding ring fell down the sink," she grumbled. "Think you can get it, or should I call a plumber?" I asked, a bit annoyed by her tone. Peering under the sink, I replied, "If it's in the trap, I'll get it out. It'll just take a minute." But she snapped, "Don't worry, I won't need it tonight anyway." Interesting, I thought. She's headed out, doesn't need her wedding ring. And that's no accident. Alarmed, I decided to stay alert but silent. I caught a glimpse of her slipping into the bedroom, putting on a sexy lingerie I'd never seen before. She avoided looking at me as she dressed. "Just another girls' night out like every Tuesday," she said, irritated. "You remember, don't you?" Getting nowhere, I went to the garage to grab pliers. She left without saying a word. The trap was on her side of the sink, so I had to move some of her items to reach it. While doing so, I noticed a plain brown box. Curiously, I opened it and found an enema and dowsing kit. What's going on here? I thought. She always complained about digestive issues, but this seemed new. And since when did she need to douche? Digging further, I found the enema nozzle still wet. I felt sick. Rumors about husbands being the last to know seemed true. But what did I actually know? Not much yet. In business, I always did my research before making a move. That's what I'll do now, I decided. I'll start gathering information. But first, I still had to retrieve her ring. Maybe she'd need it after all. I marked the spot where the brown box sat on the floor to see if it would be moved, and took a couple of photos of the contents to check if she put it back as I'd found it. She returned around midnight, slipped into the bathroom, and turned on the shower. I pretended to be asleep, though my heart was pounding. She crawled into bed, and after settling in, she giggled softly. The next morning, I got up early, having barely slept. I closed the bathroom door for privacy before my shower. As I suspected, the brown box had been moved. The nozzle was still damp, and the box had shifted slightly from my mark. Enema before going out, dowsing afterward. Someone was preparing for closeness. Using a Ziploc bag, I carefully collected her underwear and sent it for biological testing. Being an accountant, I knew how assets get divided in a divorce. I'd seen enough cases to know that Sarah would likely keep the house until the kids left for college, while I'd pay child support and lose time with my daughters. I couldn't stand the thought of funding a home where she might entertain someone else while our daughters were left without the supervision they deserved. Now that I had the facts, I began to formulate a plan. The main goal for me was keeping custody of my daughters. I've always been financially secure and a reliable father. Now, I needed to show that she wasn't fit to care for them. The word poison came to mind, not literally but emotionally. Sarah's a perfectionist, holding everyone to high standards. When things go wrong, she loses control, blowing minor problems out of proportion. She can be harsh with her employees, with me, and with the kids. I could use this behavior to turn my daughters against her so they'd choose to stay with me after the divorce. That way, the house and custody of the girls would be mine. Quietly, I turned off her alarm clock. She despises lateness, especially in others. After her long night, I figured she might appreciate a little extra sleep. The kids came down for breakfast and asked where their mom was. I told them, "She got in late and will probably sleep in a bit." They understood. Like most teens, they enjoyed a chance to sleep in. After noticing her late-night conversations on her phone, I queued up her video playlist and muted it, hoping that by the time she woke up, her phone battery would be dead. She had an important staff meeting Wednesday morning, which she'd mentioned was crucial. An hour later, I heard her scream my name. Apparently, it was my fault she overslept after her night with some guy. I slipped away to the garage to avoid her tirade and saw one of her Lexus tires was low enough to set off the dashboard alert. She hated anything blocking her screen, so I knew this would drive her nuts on the way to work. Hannah and Miranda weren't spared either. Sarah rushed around trying to dress, do her hair, and apply makeup all at once. Meanwhile, I switched the garage door setting to lock, keeping the roller door down. As she backed out, she didn't realize it hadn't opened, slamming into it and crushing the bottom panels. The three of us walked over, watching as she hit the steering wheel in fury. When she finally pulled forward, I I raised the door with a loud creak, and she tore out of the garage, barely missing the mailbox. "This might be more entertaining than I thought," I muttered. "Let's see what she does when she tries to call the office with a dead phone." Hugging the kids, I told them, "Mom's just a little stressed. She'll be better tonight. She still loves you, but maybe not me as much." We all laughed together. I set the alarm clock in our room to max volume, making sure it was on. Unlike Sarah, I made it to work on time, whistling as I walked in. My mood stayed bright until 10 a.m., when my phone buzzed so hard it nearly fell off the desk. Must be my lovely wife, I thought. "Good morning, my dear," I answered cheerfully, only to be met with a stream of curses. Her voice was shrill. "You need to come here and fix my tire. I nearly died driving this trap. If I'd had the Mercedes I wanted, this wouldn't have happened." "Just call AAA, I replied. "They'll take care of it." Her response was, "Go to hell." Still in a good mood, I told my assistant I'd be out until after lunch. My first stop was a security store, where I picked up a few small cameras and a voice recorder for her purse. I needed to know more about what was going on. Back home, I set up cameras in the living room and our bedroom, then adjusted the damaged garage panels, though they still looked rough, signaling to all the neighbors what had happened. After that, I reviewed my personal banking and investments. We only had one joint credit card, so I canceled it. I left our shared household account open, reminding myself to transfer half of the balance on payday. I returned home before Sarah and started dinner. As I listened to the garage door's strained creak, she nearly tore it off its hinges coming in. The girls screamed from the kitchen table as she stormed in, visibly furious. She glared at me, saying, "This was the worst day ever. I'm going upstairs for a bath." We had a quiet, whispered dinner afterward, as if we were hiding from a storm. I went upstairs to ask if she wanted to eat, but she threw a bar of soap at me and growled, "If I wanted dinner, I would have told you. Now leave me alone." It was the perfect time to make a small cut in her purse lining and slip the recorder inside. I went downstairs to sleep on the sofa, wanting to avoid the blast of her alarm clock in the morning. Sure enough, the loud rap song that erupted from her alarm, accompanied by her screech and the girls' startled yelps, woke the entire house. The noise was like a drill sergeant's wake-up call, and while Sarah fussed in the bathroom, I went to the garage and smeared dark grease from the lawnmower on her car seat. After she sat on it, people might think she had an embarrassing accident on the way to work, this time in a literal, not figurative sense. Her mood was as venomous as the night before. I even dabbed some grease on the skirt she'd worn the day before to make sure someone else would be to blame for the mess. Sarah's assistant, Linda, married to a friend of mine, called to tell me how Sarah discovered her stained skirt at work. She said Hurricane Sarah was in full force, and everyone was on edge. Over the next few days, I decided to ease up on the pranks. But small inconveniences started to happen on their own. One of her diamond earrings vanished from the table. A wine stain appeared on the dress she'd worn last Tuesday, though she didn't remember spilling anything. The lining of her favorite shoes began to peel. Since I knew where she kept her password book, several sites she used started rejecting her logins, and when she drove her Lexus, she'd hear a bearing ball rolling around in the door whenever she braked or turned. Every day brought a minor mishap. For her, it was like a slow bleed, and I'd say we were about halfway through. The real test came on Tuesday. She came home after work, changed for another bachelorette party, and didn't say a word to any of us. She locked the bathroom door while she got ready, and just like the last Tuesday, I noticed the wet enema tip again. But this time, I tracked her movements using the locator on her phone. Her first stop was Bonefish Grill. Then she headed to O'Hara's dance bar. I wasn't interested in what she did at the club, only in who she'd leave with. I'd been watching from home, so once I saw her next stop, I drove to O'Hara's to wait. Finishing my coffee in the parking lot, I watched her walk out with a man, hand in hand. They hugged, shared a long kiss, and then got into separate cars. I followed for a block before letting the locator take over. They ended up at a Motel 6 near the highway. From the street, I could see them enter a room with an outside door. Knowing they'd be there a while, I pulled into the lot and jotted down her boyfriend's car details: make, model, and license plate. Then I let some air out of his front tire, just enough to trip the low-pressure alert, and smeared grease on the windshield. I knew the first thing she'd do was turn on the wipers, which would smear the whole window. The next day would be interesting. I'd finally be able to hear what was captured on the voice recorder I'd hidden in her purse. After 1 a.m., she slipped into bed after a quick bathroom stop. She hadn't touched her phone or alarm, so it seemed like my plan was working. When she was asleep, I got up, retrieved the recorder from her purse, and plugged it into my laptop to charge while I downloaded the audio. The next morning, with the house empty, I listened to it. Though the dinner and club were noisy, the recorder captured enough. At Motel 6, I found out her boyfriend's name was Keith, and they were both having a great time. I learned they met up every Tuesday night and spent every other Thursday at the Hyatt during work hours. It was Sarah's turn to book the Hyatt, and they laughed about the conservative bank president's unwitting support for their antics. They even charged their luxury Hyatt encounters to their corporate cards. Since the bank's headquarters was near the Hyatt, it made for a convenient meeting spot when out-of-town staff visited. "So, when do you plan to divorce your little accountant husband?" Keith asked. Sarah laughed. "After Miranda heads to college? I love my girls, but I don't want to spend my best years shuttling to their soccer games. He's a great mom and keeps them busy, which gives me more time here with you. I don't know why, but I can't stand being around him anymore. I tried to motivate him, but he's content being an average guy with no ambition. He's wasting his life. If you're so fed up with him, why not divorce now? You'd get alimony and more time with me," Keith suggested. She giggled. "Even with alimony, I'd still have to pay for daycare, a maid, and a cook. Right now, he does it all for free and deposits into our account, and I get to stash part of my salary elsewhere hidden for when I do leave." Keith chuckled. "When are you going to leave your frigate wife?" she asked him. "That date's set," he replied. "Her father made me sign a prenup with a 20-year limit. In 3 years, I'll get half her multi-million-dollar stock portfolio." Sarah laughed. "Perfect timing. Your prenup ends around when Miranda leaves for college. Then we can both walk away." After hearing their conversation, I was stunned by how selfish and deceitful they were. Honestly, they deserved each other. With both of them trying to manipulate each other financially and otherwise, they were in for a rough time. They were cautious about being caught, rotating who booked the Hyatt hotel room each week, so neither rented more than once a month. Sarah would check the tires and ensure the garage door opened before she left. Yet, her disrespectful behavior toward me and the girls was still obvious. As expected, the test results confirmed biological traces on her underwear. I now had enough evidence to contact my lawyer, Jeff Green, and start the divorce proceedings, requesting full custody of the girls since I was their primary caregiver. Given their mom's actions, I doubted they'd even want to see her. Jeff warned me, "I'll add it, but it won't be easy." I proposed a settlement where we'd split the house 50-50ths until it sold after both girls left for college. We'd each keep our separate investments and retirement accounts. With my income structured to match hers, neither of us would pay child support, though she'd still owe childcare contributions, including for college. We'd saved enough to cover tuition, housing, books, and food, but not for extras. As she moved into a full-time VP role, Sarah signed up for the bank's deferred compensation program. I decided to leave that account alone in case she tried to come after my business investments. I'd have leverage with her deferred pay. Preparing for the divorce, I began moving important items into storage and backing up my computer files daily to an external drive. While I hoped to keep the house, I wasn't sure how she'd react when served. On my lawyer's advice, I also hired a private investigator to find out more about Keith, providing the license plate number to speed up the search. Every year, the bank's senior management holds a formal dinner and dance at the Hyatt Hotel after the annual budget review. This black tie event for executives and their spouses includes hotel bookings for many attendees. Sarah had told me about it years ago, but by the time she joined senior management, she'd already decided I wasn't worthy to attend. She would frequently bring it up, saying that if I'd been more successful, I might have made it there myself. But I had grown tired of these people. I kept searching her closets and drawers for more evidence of her infidelity. A week before the event, I found a shoebox shoved in the back corner of her closet. I always searched those far corners first. Inside was a pair of elegant Jimmy Choo shoes, no receipt attached. I looked them up and couldn't believe it. Over $1,000. With the event coming up, I decided to have some fun with this. Instead of swapping them with an old pair of yard boots or Crocs, I took the heels to the workshop and carefully twisted each one a few degrees in a vise. Then I rewrapped the shoes and put them back. Since finding her brown box, I'd learned a lot about handling delicate items. The day before the celebration, the investigator called me into his office. He told me that her lover, Keith Miller, was a senior loan officer at Sarah's bank. This could have serious career consequences, since her main role involved ensuring compliance in the credit department, and the bank had a strict no fraternization policy. They were skating on thin ice. "Excellent," I said. "And could you set up some cameras at the senior management dinner at the Hyatt on Friday night?" Since he already had a photo of Sarah, I asked him to capture footage of her walking and dancing. He was glad for the additional job, and I looked forward to having more concrete evidence. What I saw that Friday night was priceless. The investigator and I couldn't stop laughing. Sarah was stumbling around with the shifted heels forcing her legs outward and causing her to sway. She bumped into tables and knocked over 2 bottles of red wine. I might even send it to America's Funniest Videos if Sarah signs the release. Naturally, she and Keith later disappeared into his room, where they spent the night together. Everything was documented with a tiny camera slipped under the hotel door. It's incredible how much technology can enhance our lives these days. Sarah came home before noon on Saturday, but stayed hidden until late Sunday morning. She should have gone to church that morning, but she skipped it. On Wednesday afternoons, she often came home from work exhausted, likely due to her late classes. After her Tuesday night outings, she'd head straight for a bath. This Wednesday, however, I decided to mess with her hot water. She mumbled a hello as she headed to the bathroom, barely acknowledging me. I waited as she adjusted the tap for her bath. When I heard the sink running, signaling she was washing up, I slipped into the utility room. Each faucet in our house has its own water line, regulated by a wall-mounted manifold. I quickly turned off the hot water line to the bathroom, leaving only cold water to fill the tub. Once the water stopped, I turned the hot water back on. Moments later, I heard a shriek as she lowered herself into the icy bath, bubbles making it slippery. She floundered, grabbing at the walls for support. I rushed in to help, but she had already ripped the towel rack off the wall. Trying not to laugh, I helped her out, trembling, soaked, and furious. She slapped me, complaining about the hot water outage. The girls ran in only to find their mother raging, undressed, and furious. Sarah turned on them, yelling, "This is all your fault! You used up all the hot water! I couldn't even relax because of you! Damn you!" She stormed off to the bedroom, and the girls, shaken, began crying. They tried to tell her they hadn't used any hot water, but she shouted, "Quiet! I don't want to hear your excuses! Get out of my sight!" They ran off, crying. I hadn't expected her to turn on them like that. I misjudged how far her anger would spread. She then turned her fury on me. "What are you staring at, you fool? Fix my bathtub. Do you even know how to do anything right in my house?" I led her to the bathroom and turned the hot water back on, sprinkling some on her hand to prove it was working. I stared at her silently for a few seconds, then left to take the girls out to dinner. Forget about the meal I'd been making. As we drove, I pulled over a few blocks away to comfort the girls, who were still in tears. I told them, "I'm so sorry you had to go through that. You don't deserve it. You're wonderful girls, and I'm so proud of you. Please forgive your mother and forgive me for letting this happen." They seemed reassured, and it reminded me to be careful about how I distanced us from Sarah. Even though I was enjoying getting back at her, the girls' well-being was my priority. By the time we got back, it was already late, so I left the kitchen as it was and lay down on the sofa. In the middle of the night, I sensed a presence. It was Sarah, standing over me. "Yes?" I muttered, startled. She just stood there before finally speaking. I shouldn't have yelled at the girls. It wasn't their fault. I probably just turned the wrong knob. Over the past month, she explained, she'd been feeling overwhelmed and frustrated about so many things. Flat tires, garage doors, ruined shoes, each minor inconvenience pushing her over the edge. I need to get my life back on track. With that, she turned and went back upstairs. And that was all she said. The following week, I got an unexpected offer. One of my investment partners had a 2-bedroom apartment in Breckenridge, Colorado, available to rent at half price. It was for the week between Christmas and New Year, and the previous tenants had backed out. I told him I'd get back to him. The girls were still shaken from their mother's outburst, and though Sarah had apologized, her words lingered. When I asked them if they'd like to join me for a ski week in Breckenridge, they practically tackled me with hugs and kisses. I booked tickets for the 4 of us, hoping to give Sarah one last chance to mend our family. I paid extra to keep the tickets refundable just in case. Later, when Sarah was back downstairs, cleaned up and ready for dinner, I had one of the girls ask if she'd like to join us on the ski trip. They chose Hannah, as she could barely contain her excitement and would have spilled the surprise anyway. Hannah said, "Mom, Dad rented a 2-bedroom condo in Breckenridge for the week between Christmas and New Year. Could you find some time to come with us? It'll be so much fun." Sarah smiled, ready to respond, but then paused, lost in thought about something I couldn't quite read. Then she raised her eyebrows with a slight smirk. I'd love to, honey, but it's year-end at the bank and it's crucial that everything balances properly on December 31st. I really have to stay in town. I'm so sorry. I felt sorry, too. Sorry that Hannah's excitement was met with a weak excuse. The compliance department has nothing to do with the year-end balance sheet. You don't need to be an accountant to know that. Her smirk told me she saw this as her chance to spend a week with that guy, Keith, right in our home. The next week, my private investigator set up the house cameras to stream over Wi-Fi, giving me remote access from Colorado. I wasn't interested in watching the two of them together. I had a different scene in mind. Before we left for Colorado, I applied jalapeno pepper juice to her enema tip. If she wanted hot fun, she'd get it. Sarah played the pleasant mother at the airport, saying, "Be careful," and giving the girls a short hug and me a quick peck. I told her, "I love you, Sarah," and got a quick, "Love you too." The flight and drive to the condo went smoothly. The girls, who had never seen the Rocky Mountains, went straight out onto the deck to take in the pine-scented air. Meanwhile, I set up my computer and connected to the Wi-Fi cameras at home. Right on time, Sarah arrived at 6 p.m. and went to the main bathroom for her usual routine. I didn't need a camera in the bedroom. I wasn't interested in their personal physical moments. I had views of the landing, living room, and kitchen. Suddenly, Sarah stumbled down the stairs, screeching in pain. Apparently, she'd discovered that her life-saving tube of Preparation H was also tainted with jalapeno juice. Her face was flushed, contorted in agony. I bet my investigator would have enjoyed seeing that. I wondered how long it would take her to recover, and if it might ruin their plans for the week. Too bad for them. That evening, the girls and I went to Breckenridge's beautifully decorated downtown, covered in a fresh foot of snow, to grab some pizza. As we were heading back to the condo, the girls heard music and traced it to a nearby teen club, a place for kids to hang out while parents relaxed elsewhere. "Dad," Hannah asked, "could we go in for a few minutes?" I agreed. They'd been through a lot recently and deserved some fun. The club was lively, with a packed dance floor and lots of laughter. The girls wanted to stay, so I found a table near the edge of the room and asked them to check in with me now and then. This was perfect. I could catch up on emails while keeping an eye on them. It didn't take long before the girls were dancing, laughing, and chatting with some boys. Now and then they'd look over, and I'd raise my Diet Coke to signal everything was fine. Several other parents were scattered around the room, and one mom across the dance floor caught my eye. She was very attractive, and as we both scanned the crowd for our kids, our eyes met, and we exchanged a smile. She had 2 sons who periodically came over for money or snacks. My girls seemed to spend more time near her table as the night went on. After I finished my messages, I looked up and saw her walking toward me. She caught the attention of others as she moved through the crowd. She was wearing slim-fitting ski pants that seemed to cling, showing her shape, with a snug sweater that somehow made her look even warmer than the freezing temperature outside. Stopping at my table, she smiled. "You must be Hannah and Miranda's dad. Why not come join us instead of sitting here alone?" I answered with a grin, trying not to seem too eager. "My girls seem to be great at finding the right people to hang out with. I'm Paul, by the way." "Donna," she said with a smile. "And those are my sons, Zach and Michael. They're 16 and 14, practically counting down the days until they're 21. "Funny, my girls are the same ages," I replied, chuckling. "What a coincidence." She smiled, adding, "In the time I've been watching your girls interact with mine, I have to say, they're sweet kids. You should be proud." "Thank you," I said, nodding. "And your boys seem well behaved. Though maybe that's because they're under your watch." Donna laughed. "You're observant! I work from home, so I'm the one who sends them off in the morning and greets them when they get back. They're my priority these days." For both Donna's family and ours, it was our first day in Breckenridge. The 4 teenagers quickly made plans for when and where they'd ski. Donna and I coordinated so we'd have separate times to celebrate with them. The plan was to see the kids off in the morning, then enjoy breakfast and spend the rest of the day skiing together. Over the week, Donna and I got to know each other well, and we liked what we discovered. I shared my struggles with Sarah and my plan to divorce her, though I kept the details about securing custody for the girls to myself. While I didn't feel great about it, I knew it was best for my daughters to be with me rather than with someone as selfish as Sarah. Donna shared that she'd been widowed 2 years ago after her husband was eliminated by a drunk driver. We both struggled with forgiving people who had disrupted our lives. and having someone who understood made a difference. On our last evening, Donna and I went to dinner without the teens, spending the final half hour of the night making out on the couch after they'd gone to bed. By week's end, we both realized we wanted to see more of each other. The kids were equally enthusiastic, and I knew it was time to finalize my marriage's end with Sarah. When we returned home, Sarah looked worn and drained. She probably should have come to Colorado with us. We'd had a fantastic time since our first night watching my hot wife on camera, though I lost interest in keeping tabs on her antics. I told Jeff, my lawyer, to finalize and file the divorce papers. The girls took the news about the divorce as expected. They had witnessed the breakdown between me and Sarah over the last 6 months, and they could see the contrast between my interactions with Donna and the tension with their mom. Hannah voiced the big question. "What happens to Miranda and me? Where will we live?" I hugged them both, saying, "You two have always been my world, and that will never change. I've asked for full custody so we can stay together in this house. You'll keep going to the same school, stay with your friends, and I'll still be here for you every day. You'll be able to see your mom whenever you want." I continued, "You'll have a choice during the proceedings about who you want to live with. The parent who gets custody will keep the house until you're both in college, but that's entirely your choice. Remember, regardless of where you decide to stay, both your mom and I love you. You'll have plenty of time to think about it before making a decision. Now, take my car and go out for dinner while your mom and I talk. You don't need to be here for this conversation." Once the girls were gone, I checked my phone to see multiple missed calls and messages. I suspected who they were from and decided to call Sarah back. She didn't bother with a greeting, launching straight into a string of curses that could have melted my phone. I let her vent until she was out of breath. Finally, she demanded, "Why? Why did you do this? Why don't you love me after everything I've done for you and the girls?" I replied, "Why don't you come here so we can talk about it?" All I heard was a click. She was on her way. Within minutes, she stormed through the door, shouting, "Why?" I calmly answered, "You've been cheating on me with Keith Miller every Tuesday night. I'm not sure for how long. What did you expect would happen? I gave you a chance to start fresh with a family trip to Colorado, but you chose Keith over us. That was your choice, and now there are consequences. Pack whatever you need and find a hotel while we sort this out. I'm not about to throw your things in the yard. Today, you're welcome to see the girls whenever, but once you're settled in a hotel, find a lawyer and review my divorce offer. It's fair. From now on, we'll only be in touch to coordinate visits with the girls or your belongings. There's nothing else to discuss." I went to my office, closed the door, and listened to her angrily slamming suitcases. What I didn't hear was any crying, which was telling. I knew I'd never want to be with her again, and apparently she felt the same. Next on my list was changing the locks and updating all security codes. Sarah's rage continued through the divorce proceedings. It wasn't that she wanted to reconcile or save the family. She was furious because she didn't get to file first. She wanted everyone to think she'd left the weak accountant rather than me leaving her for cheating. To her, the real humiliation was that I had filed for divorce first, which struck a professional blow to her pride. Neither of us had any interest in attending marriage counseling. We were completely done with each other. All the good memories we'd shared had long since faded. I felt fortunate to move forward with the divorce, unlike many others who are stuck. First, Hannah and Miranda chose to live with me, staying in our house. They saw their mother only once every week or two and disliked how she would ask about me and whether I missed her. I had minimal contact with Sarah, often avoiding being around when she picked up or dropped off the girls. Sarah had such a strong dislike for me and my small accounting firm that she wanted nothing to do with it. Instead, she kept her 401k and deferred compensation funds, assuming I didn't know about them. She also had to cover childcare costs, and her bank's health insurance plan was better than mine. I kept my knowledge about her Hyatt rendezvous under wraps, saving it for possible use later. She took any furniture she considered stylish, leaving the rest for me and the girls. She also left behind all family photos, as if we would treat them like shrines to her. I was sure she had other hidden funds, but I didn't care. My focus was on my children and my business. Anything related to her was secondary. Someone anonymously sent videos of her and Keith to Keith's wife, which led to a spike in legal fees citywide. They moved into a posh apartment in an upscale part of town, and I wondered how their relationship would fare beyond their escapades. After the divorce, I invited Donna and her boys to spend the weekend with us. We didn't engage in anything beyond kissing and hugging, setting an example for the kids. She was the perfect antidote to the bitterness left by my marriage. Both of us knew our relationship was headed somewhere serious. Donna had her own place, but we were mindful, especially with two 16-year-olds who enjoyed each other's company and had adjoining rooms. They kept us vigilant. Donna, a registered nurse, worked remotely for a health insurance company, handling medical claims. I set up a dedicated office for her in my home. A year later, I reached out to a friend at a CPA firm that audited banks, sharing a story about two senior employees using company cards for personal meetups during work hours. He thanked me for the tip, and after an audit, he brought the issue to the bank president. The bank chose not to file a public fraud case, but both Sarah and Keith were fired. The bank then informed its insurance provider of the theft, leading the bond company to pursue damages from them. Sarah and Keith were essentially blacklisted from working together in banking nationwide. They also lost part of their retirement savings and had to leave their upscale apartment. Now the bond company is suing them for bank credit card fraud. Keith's financial troubles were compounded by his divorce, which meant his wife and kids would take a large portion of his future income. It's unfortunate he didn't wait for his prenuptial agreement to kick in. Sarah now works as a paralegal at a divorce law firm. She's well-versed in the legal and social impact of divorce and provides helpful guidance to her clients. But after a day of advising others, she returns to her modest apartment, reflecting on the tragic end of her own marriage. She doesn't seem to be interested in the successful businessmen and doctors she once thought she deserved instead of me. By year's end, the market value of my once worthless investments had grown to over $2 million. It's shaping up to be a great year, especially with my wedding to Donna planned for mid-June. Reflecting on my journey, I realize how profoundly my life has shifted, shaped by both the trials and the unexpected gifts that emerged through these years. I've walked through betrayal and manipulation, once bound to a marriage that crumbled under the weight of neglect, dishonesty, and selfish choices. In that shadowed chapter, I fought to hold on to my family, believing love and dedication could mend the fractures in my relationship with Sarah. But as her actions and distance deepened, it became clear that the woman I had devoted myself to was no longer the same person I once cherished. The unraveling of my marriage was not only about her deception, but a gradual awakening within me. I had built a life centered on stability and security, values I held dear as a husband and father. Yet, these very traits were the ones Sarah grew to resent. She desired something different, an image of success and glamour that didn't align with the family-centered, modest life I valued. For years, I tried to ignore the signs, believing that hard work, loyalty, and communication could bring us back together. But the cracks in our foundation had spread too deep, and eventually, her disregard for our family's well-being became impossible to overlook. When the truth finally surfaced, her deceit, the secret life she lived behind the facade of our marriage, I was torn between the rage of betrayal and the grief of losing the life I had envisioned for our daughters and myself. Every decision I made thereafter was driven by a desire to protect Hannah and Miranda, to ensure they wouldn't suffer for the choices their mother had made. Navigating the divorce and custody battles was grueling, a process that required strategy and resolve. But ultimately, the truth was on my side. The courts recognized my commitment to our daughters, awarding me custody and granting us the stability we needed to rebuild. In the aftermath of that storm, Donna entered my life. At first, I was cautious, hesitant to open myself up after the devastation I had endured. But Donna's presence was different. She didn't judge my past or diminish my experiences. She was a reminder that kindness and integrity still exist, a warmth that cut through the walls I had unknowingly built around my heart. Donna didn't come into my life to fix me or heal my wounds. She simply walked beside me, her companionship and honesty allowing me to find peace on my own terms. Our relationship developed with a blend of friendship and understanding, a stark contrast to the tense, fractured dynamic I had known with Sarah. Donna understood the challenges of single parenthood, as she too had faced her own heartaches. Her empathy and strength taught me the value of finding a partner who stands as an equal, someone who believes in the same foundation of trust and respect. She brought joy back into my life, and in her, I discovered the beauty of genuine partnership, something I hadn't realized I was missing all those years. Together, Donna and I have built a life filled with laughter, mutual support, and a shared vision for the future. Our children, bonded through this journey, have grown resilient and compassionate, having witnessed what it means to prioritize family and love over ego and resentment. My daughters, once caught in the crossfire of their mother's bitterness, now flourish in an environment where they know they are cherished, protected, and supported. They've seen the importance of integrity and learned that relationships require nurturing, respect, and honesty to thrive. Looking back, I am both humbled and proud. Life has taught me the value of standing firm in my principles, even when it means walking away from something once held dear. The trials I faced were painful, but they revealed my strength and resilience. I know now that happiness isn't simply given. It's cultivated through patience, trust, and the courage to pursue what truly matters. With Donna, I have a partner who values these same qualities, who brings peace and joy not only to me, but to my daughters as well. She is more than just a companion. She is a true partner, someone I look forward to sharing every part of my life with. As I prepare for my upcoming wedding to Donna, I feel an overwhelming sense of gratitude. I am grateful for the second chance at love, for the opportunity to build a family grounded in trust, and for the lessons learned from a painful past. I know this new chapter is a gift, one that I will cherish and honor with the same commitment I've shown my daughters. The future I once feared, filled with uncertainty and regret, has transformed into a life rich with promise and peace. To those who have walked through betrayal and heartache, I hope my story offers a reminder that brighter days await. There is life after pain, and though the journey may be difficult, it is worth every step. We have the power to rebuild, to find joy again, and to embrace a future defined by hope and love. With Donna by my side, I'm entering this next chapter with an open heart, eager to continue building a life filled with laughter, compassion, and resilience. It's not the life I had originally imagined, but in so many ways, it's better. The happiness I feel now is deeper, rooted in the knowledge that I've earned it, and I'm ready to live fully in the peace and joy we have all fought to achieve.